Hey, hello again. Back for some more. This time we're looking at regulation and communication technology. That is, how does the government regulate communication technologies and what's the point? And take a look at some of the interesting things about this. Let's look at it this way, first of all. The government and technology, the government's job is to protect the consumer, but also to protect the business interest. And so the government has to sort of do a balancing act here of what's better for the consumers, the general population, versus what's better for business. And you see sometimes there'll be some differences of opinion. Okay, so what is it? All right. Regulation refers to creating and enforcing legal frameworks and policies that oversee the development, distribution, and usage of communication technologies, such as the internet, which I will point out is controversial to some extent, and of course, mobile and landline phones, television, radio, broadcasting systems in general. Okay, that's what we're talking about, regulating these industries. There are three types of regulation. The regulation falls into these categories. Either we're going to regulate the content. What can you put on the air? We're going to regulate the structure of the industries. How can you structure? How many people, how many stations can you own, for example? And then technical. That would be the kind of protocols and the way that, for example, like HD versus broadcasting through the air. Okay, that would be a technical standard. So we look at the technical structure and the content. Again, we're going to look at the objectives of the regulations would be, of course, like I said a while ago, protect the consumers, to ensure privacy and security. Let's see, it's not going to, for some reason, foster fair competition and adapt to technological advances. I don't know why the thing wasn't working, but for some reason it wasn't. Okay, so protect the consumers has to do with safeguarding individuals from fraud, data breaches, unfair practices. Privacy has to do with establishing rules for handling sensitive information and preventing cyber threats. For example, sensitive information such as health records or your social security number, like driver's license, etc. Fostering fair competition is to keep big businesses from running little business out of business. So the competition is not always business versus consumer. Sometimes it's organization versus organization. And the worst organization was the one that has a monopoly. Nobody else can get into that particular market share. And then, of course, updating policies to address emerging technologies. We didn't have any we had a regulation policy, communication regulation policy in 1934. The next one was 1996. We went all that time. So we weren't keeping up, but the government's supposed to keep up. And they're trying to do a better job of it now. Okay, what's the historical context of this regulation? Let's take a look at the early days. Telegraph and telephone were two early technologies. The telegraph was, of course, a groundbreaking technology of its time, and it necessitated regulatory measures such as the Telegraph Act of 1860 in the UK and the Pacific Telegraph Act of 1860 in the United States to set standards for operations and manage monopolistic practices. There wasn't a big monopoly in the telegraph early on, but later on they decided we better get some regulation in here. For telephones, the regulatory milestones were the Kingsbury Commitment of 1913. It sought to balance AT&T's monopoly with competitive access to smaller companies. That was 1913. Keep that in mind. But AT&T did not give up the monopoly at that point in time. State and federal regulation bodies like the Interstate Commerce Commission, the ICC, standardized and oversaw these services. Now, if you're watching closely, say a semi pulls up next to you at a stoplight, you will look over to the side, you'll see a bunch of licensed stuff, and you'll notice they have an ICC license. And the reason is that big trucks, semis, and telephones are both carriers because they carry things over from one state to another. It calls them interstate commerce. A lot of people wouldn't think about that, but that's how it is. Now, in the mid 20th century, the rise of radio and television prompted new broadcasting laws, especially first the rise of radio, then the rise of television. Now, just going a little bit ahead, spectrum allocation. That is, radios have frequencies, TVs have frequencies, and they operate in what we call the spectrum. That's sort of this wide outer space kind of area that the U.S. government owns everything over the U.S. Land. So the spectrum allocation became a critical issue as radio and TV's frequencies were limited resources. The Federal Communications Commission, FCC, was established under the Communication Act 1934, managed spectrum to use, they manage spectrum use to prevent interference. If I'm using spectrum and the guy in Indianapolis uses the same spectrum, or using the same frequency, our signals are gonna overlap and crash, and we're not gonna, get our broadcast out. So content standards needed to ensure public interest, such as requirements for educational programming, and restrictions on explicit content. What I'm saying here is that they had to make consideration to have educational programming, but that was one of the, for the public interest. They fall apart on that today, but early on when it was a bigger issue. Keep in mind that because the first television broadcasts were educational programming, so it had a long history of already being part of the TV industry. And then, of course, explicit. The main thing is explicit content. You can't say certain words. You can't use cuss words. You can't be nude. You can't have excessive violence. Those kinds of things are to keep the content standards. Okay, and then licensing systems, of course, created to monitor and regulate broadcasting entities. They will ensure fairness and transparency. And again, whether that happens or not is a matter of issue, is a matter of debate. Okay, let me talk about the telegraph for a second. Was it an extension of the post office? In the U.S., no. In many other countries, yes. The United States didn't want the telegraph. They didn't care about the telegraph. The United States Congress didn't care about the telegraph. So it never became part of the U.S. government. This may be a good thing for the U.S. because that freed up people not to be constrained by the government as they were developing their inventions. In some countries, say, for example, Great Britain, telegraph is owned by the telephone company, by the post office, which is owned by the government. The government owns, what does the government own the technology? No. Now, I said a while ago about the monopolies of the telegraph. In 1851, there were at least 50 telegraph companies. The telegraph was only invented in 1844. So in 6 years, they had 50 companies, all using their own protocols. No regulation on what they had to do. No regulation on who could do it. No regulation, no licensing. That created tons of problems. I want to send a message to New York. I go to this place and I say something to New York, but they're not connected to New York. So regulation can be a good thing for the consumers, okay? So we did have the Interstate Commerce Act was passed in 1887. And like I said, the telephone became part of that. The telegraph did as well. So the interesting thing is this. Samuel Morse goes to Congress and he says, I want to set up a dummy system for my telegraph to show you how good it is and how you might want to take it over, and I will be glad to give it to you. So they say no. But we'll tell you what. We'll see. We want to see this works. So we will give you a grant to set up a telegraph line from Baltimore to Washington. And they did. And so it worked. Right by the railroad track. And you'll still see them there today, by the way, not just telegraph, but telephone lines as well. So what that started was that the government wasn't going to own the technology, but the government would aid private profit-making entities to develop their technology. This is probably one of the reasons why the U.S. is one of the leaders in the world in developing technology, because there is no fear that the government, well, we should say it this way, not only is there no fear the government will take it over, but the government actually will give you grants to help you develop it. Because assuming that the development of a technology is good for the population, not just the guy who develops it. The guy who develops it may become rich, but what he does with this helps a lot of other people. Now the telephone, okay, 1910, Interstate Commerce Commission, ICC, they're regulating the telephone. Okay, just like they regulate travel of any kind of travel carrying from one state to the next. 1920, the Transportation Act of 1920, which is a common carrier, was now referring to telephones. They were saying telephones are common carrier, but they didn't put it into law until 1920. Okay? In 1907 was the first time that the president of AT&T first used the term universal service, and that's going to be an important term later on. Radio, we had the Wireless Ship Act. Wireless Ship Act was introduced because there was a shipwreck and there was no communication on board. There was a guy on board who was doing communication, one guy, and he went to bed. And this other ship was actually distress signal. Nobody heard it. So the law said you had to have at least two guys on the ship. Now that was replaced in 1812 after the big shipwreck, Titanic, in 1912. What they changed the law to was you had to have 24-hour surveillance, and you had to have enough people on board to do that. That was the main point of that law. Then that was replaced in 1927 by the Federal Radio Act, which was a more comprehensive. It had to do with how we're going to allocate spectrum, what kind of license you're going to have, what kind of frequency you're going to use, and several types of regulations, both technical regulations as well as content regulations. They didn't at that time work too much about the structure of the industry, but they were concerned with the content. They said you can't have, cussing again. That was another thing. That was, Puritan background in the United States. So the content was important as well as technical. We had to have certain regulations. You're going to broadcast at certain frequencies, that kind of thing. Now, television, the big act was 1934. That's when the FCC was started, the Federal Communications Commission. What it did was, among other things, it replaced the Radio Act of 1927, for one thing. It limited ownership of stations, both radio and television, but a tight control on the transmission, tightening it up so that the frequencies wouldn't overlap. And of course, these restrictions on indecent materials. So you can see that a lot of that regulation, like I said, is between the content and the technical specs. And then we also had the 1949 Fairness Doctrine, which meant that if a politician came on your TV station or your radio station and he gave a speech, you had to give his opponent equal time. Okay, I'm going to stop right here. I'll give us a break for a few minutes, and I'll come back and I'll start talking about cable and DBS and how those regulations play. So we'll stop here for a minute.